From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good evening, and welcome to the Woodall Pavilion in the Library of Congress. We have with us Dr. Frank Baer, the curator of historical musical instruments at the German National Museum in Nuremberg, which has the largest collection of keyboards dating from the time of Mozart to the time of Chopin. With him is Canadian fortepianist Ludwig Semerjian, Lud for short, who will play Haydn and Mozart sonatas in tomorrow evening's concert in the Coolidge Auditorium next door. He has also recorded the complete Mozart sonatas on several, I believe 7 of the period instruments in the museum's collection. The Library of Congress Music Division, in collaboration with the Orchestre de la Nouvelle France in Montreal and the SMW World of Sound, is pleased to have these gentlemen here tonight with us to share their experience of, quote, a journey to the land of the forgotten sound, unquote. After the presentation, there will be time for question and answer. And then after that, they will be here to sign copies of the book, Pianos in Perspective, which is a documentation of the Mozart project, and also sign CDs of the Mozart sonatas. And so let us welcome Dr. Frank Baer.
Thank you, Thomas. So you already did thank all who made this possible. I want to thank all those you mentioned, and first of all, the Library of Congress. Good evening. I'm very glad and feel honored to speak in such a prestigious place. I read this is the biggest library in the world. And I would like to introduce you this evening to a fascinating project. For us, it was fascinating, as Thomas said, to record all the Mozart sonata for pianoforte with Ludwig Semerjian on 7 period instruments from our collection. The range of this, the time lap of this instrument is from 1788 to around 1805. 2 announcements, perhaps, before I really start. The first is, if ever I'm going there and talking French with Ludwig, this is not to exclude you from what I want to say. This is he will help me with English. And second, when I designed this small speech, I used words like large and important, and so the last day I had the chance to see the museums here in Washington, Smithsonian Institution, and the National Gallery. And so if I say something large or important, this is to European scale. So before saying something about the project itself, I would like to say something about the place where it happened. This is the Germanisches Nationalmuseum. It is in Nuremberg, and I don't know whether you know exactly where Nuremberg is, and I suppose you perhaps don't know this museum, so this introduction. Nuremberg, the name you might know from the Nazi Party rally grounds from Adolf Hitler in the Third Reich and from the processes against crime wars after Second World War. But Nuremberg has a much longer history, and due to this history, this museum is in Nuremberg, and it's itself point of an element of German history, because Nuremberg was long times from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, in the Baroque area, an important place, a turntable for trade. It lies on the crossing of two main trade axes. This one from the north Scandinavian countries, North Germany to Italy, Florence, Venice, and the other one from east-west, from Paris to Prague, to the eastern countries, and so on to the Mediterranean. And yeah, in 1848, the situation in 19th century was, and it was the situation until First World War, until the Kaiserreich, 1871. Germany was divided in literally hundreds of small sovereign countries. So imagine you have to drive 20 miles and there is a toll. 20 other miles, there is toll. If you are in your land, which has perhaps 100 square miles, and the government changes from Catholic to Protestantic, and you want to rest Catholic, you have to leave, and all these things. So this didn't, and it was not democracy, of course, and Germans wanted to reunite a nation, a German nation, and in 1848 they made a revolution and a parliament in Frankfurt. So this didn't work. And the Germans were disappointed, but they wanted to have this nation, and they wanted to have an identifying point for their nation. And they founded the Germanisches Nationalmuseum, where Germans could find their identity, and their identity was not blood or race or ground. This was language, culture. So this museum, founded in 1852, is a trial to install this German nation, so all people of German-speaking countries and of German culture, and to give her a point of crystallization. Today, Germany is a democracy, you know this, and we no longer need this focalizing point for this. It's more in Berlin now. So today the museum documents this history, this German cultural history, and it's a national research institution, and it's the largest museum of art and culture of the German-speaking lands, and at the same time the largest museum of historical culture cultural history in Germany. We have about 1.3 million objects. The time lapse goes from 30,000 before Christ until nowadays. And the library is, now I come to the largest. It's the largest specialized library about German cultural history with 600,000 volumes. I know the Library of Congress has, as I read, 100 million of volumes, so there is a slight difference. By the way, I'm also head of this library. I'm not a librarian, but I'm also, besides the musical instrument collection, I'm head of the research service department, which comprises the library, the IT department, the archives, and the photographic workshop. So, but I'm managing this. We have our specialists. So this is the main entrance of the museum, inaugurated on this was French, 1993, and there is written here. Let's go back. Here is written Eigentum der deutschen Nation, so property of German nation. So this is to remind to the memory of the founding of this institution. Some numbers. So down there you see a side view, artificial side view of the museum. It has a total surface of 50,000 square meters. I don't know how much this is in square feet. I hope it's a lot. And half of this is exhibition surface, the other half is reserves and administration. And if you see that there are only 20,000 objects more or less exposed, you can calculate what is in the reserves and that we have big reserves and a lot of administration, sure. So this is a bird's view of a part of Nuremberg in the yellow dotted line. It's the museum's area. And here, this is the ancient Middle Ages town fortification of Nuremberg. And if you have a look here, you see something like a chapel. It is a chapel and a cloister, and under this roof there is a small cloister. So the nucleus of the museum is a Carthusian monastery, which has been given by King Ludwig of Bavaria to the founder of the museum, a Franconian nobleman. Around you see some buildings of the 19th century and buildings of the 20th century from the 1970s about, and this is the main entrance here. This finished in 1993, and all this is restoration departments. So there are two stories of restoration departments. We have also musical instrument restoration department. There is 2 exhibition halls, reserves, okay, and there is the Aufsichtshalle, which bears the name of the founder of the museum, where we made the recordings. So we had to transport the pianos from here, this is here on the ground floor in this building, to the hall. Just 5 key exhibits. In short, to the left you see the gold cone of Etzelsdorf Buch, about 1200 to 1100 before Christ. It has been found in the ground not very far from Nuremberg. It's of gold foil. It has been reconstructed, and it was the head of a magician who made sun right. Second is fibula. This is something to close a women's skirt or wardrobe, women's clothes. It was found in Italy, but it is Ellerman, and from 500 about, it's in gold and precious stone. In the middle you see the oldest globe still in existence of this planet, constructed by Martin Beheim in 1492. So 1492 is, I think it's an emblematic date for the Americas, when Christoph Colomb landed there. But when he landed there, Martin Beheim was just constructing the globe, and when the message arrived, the globe was finished, so we are not on this globe. Sorry. But I think it's one of the last globes where we are not. So now, next one, Dürer, Albrecht Dürer, the renowned artist of Nuremberg. Nuremberg, it's from 1516. It's his master Michael Wohlgemuth, and to the right, also a key work of Romanticism, Biedermeier, Karl Spitzweg. The Poor Poet of 1837. There are 3 versions, and this is version number 1. It's exposed in the museum. Short glimpse on the collections, what we have. We have always what is in red corresponds to the picture to the left. We have prehistory and early history. We have paintings from Middle Ages till nowadays, jewelry. We have a large collection about the guilds, so it's if ever you come to the museum, please come. You may see people strangely clothed in an ancient manner. They have free entrance because these are hand craftsmen who are making their tour, and they go to the museum. They have free entrance to study this collection for their craft. And we have European folk life. Further on, we have clothing, very precious pieces. We have guilds. Oh, this is what I said. Yes, it's 2 times there, sorry. We have things about pharmacy, design of 20th century, sculpture from the Middle Ages until today, arts and craft, furniture, a collection of books, historic documents, the archives, and arms. Scientific instruments and legacies of 20th century artists. This is a central collecting point in Germany. Toys. Nuremberg is the world's toy city, I think. It's not Washington, no. There is a world's largest toy fair there, and glass paintings. So, a short view to the architecture, which I mentioned from the interior. Left, you see the chapel, and right, the monastery. What is left from 19th century, most was bombed in World War II. And to the right, below, this is the ancient entrance of the museum with the original of this property of the German nation. And this is where I go to the museum every day. Architecture of 20th century, one likes it or one likes it less. Left bottom, this is the entrance hall from the interior, and bottom right, with the reflex of the chapel. On the ground floor, this is the musical instrument collection. It's housed there on about 1,000 square meters. And here we are. As Thomas said, we bear one of the most important collections of keyboards instruments, not only in Germany and in Europe, but I believe in the world. And this is centered around, this nucleus is the most important, are in fact the instruments Ludwig played. This documents an important time of Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, and a little bit farther. So we have here the row of the keyboards instruments. And the collection in itself, it has about 3,100 items. Smithsonian has 8,000, still some French, 8,000 items. And this is here from the 16th to the 20th century. What is also important are Nuremberg brass instruments. You remember the history of Nuremberg. This was from about 1500 to the middle of the 18th century, really number one in the world, so Europe, for brass instruments. And because brass instruments were military relevant objects, these were communication instruments for wars, and as there were many wars in Europe, so the trumpet maker furnished lots of reliable, good instruments, and the secrets were known in Nuremberg. But they also made musical trumpets and trombones and horns and so on. And the important Nuremberg woodwind instruments, mainly the most important are in the first half of the 18th century. And perhaps if you know something a little bit about the history of woodwind instruments, the most important makers were Johann Christoph Denner and Jakob Denner, his son. And one of the two is said to have invented the clarinet in Nuremberg about 1700. And we have one of those earliest clarinet. There are three, one with us, one in Berlin, and one in New York in the Metropolitan. What we give to instrument makers and the public are technical drawings. We have we are making and selling X-rays, and we have X-ray facilities to make X-rays of whole keyboard instruments up to 3 meters long in one shot. What we do also with the nearby University of Erlangen, this is computer tomographies, also for research. And we do CD recordings, what we are talking about this evening. This has a very long tradition. In the collection, my precursor already made a lot of recordings. Instruments were played, about 40 black vinyl discs. And when I started, this was in '97, this was just the moment when the CD killed the vinyl disc. So what should we do? Digitize, and I didn't, and it's a problem of rights. And so I started a new series, and we are now at about 20 CDs, and we are going on. And what we did with Ludwig is not the less important of these discs. What is intimately linked to these discs is, I think it's the oldest series of of music with historic informed practice on period instruments, Musica Antiqua, which was founded in 1956, and we are doing this together with the state radio of Bavaria, who is also recording the discs with Ludwig. So I have, please give me 2 minutes to inform you about an important project which we are undertaking actually. This is MIMO, Musical Instrument Museums Online. After about a year of struggle, we got funding from the European Community to digitize 45,000 musical instruments and put them on the internet. Pictures and descriptions, 1,800 sound examples, 550 video files of instruments being played. And this all come from 10 major European museums from 6 countries, and this will be in 6 countries and will be published until 2011 on the European Digital Library site, Europeana EU. So this is for instruments in European collections to put in, but to be seen by the whole world. And so if you are interested in this project, and if you want to support this, and if you want to be amongst the first people who see the prototype website and give feedback, please tell me, give me your name and your email, and you will be in the project without obligation. Okay, thank you. Let's come to this very project with this approach. So you see here these 7 pianos. They were, before we finished this project, they were distributed on different places in the collections. I think 2. We digged in the reserves, and Ludwig said, I want to play this. So he played this, and they are now in the collection. And I made an extra pedestal for this project to expose these 7 pianos. I will introduce you shortly also with sound to these pianos, but before one important thing. These pianos all come from southern Germany or from Vienna, and all have in common, the sounds are different, but all have in common the South German or Viennese action. And the South German action was probably invented by Johann Andreas Stein from Augsburg. He constructed the most ancient piano, number 1 in this project, which I will introduce you to. And this is, I will not explain how it works, but you can see. I will do it sometimes again. So this is a scale model of this action. And if you ever have seen a modern piano action, you will find this quite simple, maybe primitive, but it is simple, but it's not at all primitive. It's extremely precise, and Ludwig can surely afterwards tell something about how this is played. This is the Viennese action, and it's similar, and but it is the hammer is not in a wooden capsule, it is called in piano making, but in a brass capsule, and there are some parts which are not visible here, which makes playing still faster or more reliable. I don't know. I never asked you the question. We will discuss this. I'm curious to have the player's advice, because my piano is it's like this. So this is the first piano, Johann Andreas Stein, Augsburg, 1788. Sorry. Johann Andreas Stein is one well-known in Mozart research. From the letter Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart wrote on 1777 to his father in Salzburg. He visited the workshop of Johann Andreas Stein in Augsburg, and it seems that before he played tangent action pianos, and when he played those pianos by Johann Andreas Stein, he was overwhelmed. And the same day, Stein, he had finished 3 pianos they played in a church. I've been in this church where Mozart played. It's touching with these 3 pianos. And so Mozart, Stein himself, and his daughter Nanette. And yeah, this is a piano which is it's some kind of a Mozart piano. Mozart liked this, but he never possessed one. I will show you what about him possessed. So it sounds like this. So a very precise, brilliant sound, and one has to be able to play it, to make it sing.
Control.
To control it, yes. I can. So now this is not Mozart's piano. Mozart's piano is in Salzburg in his house, and but it's much altered after his death, and maybe this the original state of the piano of Mozart, which was from Anton Walter, like this one, was about like this. And what is very interesting in this piano, I will go back to the Stein. If you have a quiet look, one doesn't see it very well. Here is something under the keyboard, some tiny thing, just above the knees of the player. And these are, in fact, knee levers. He pushes them up, and this raises the damping. And this one don't has this. Under the music stand here, there are 2 levers to push the damping up. It's this way up and this way down, but you have to put away the 2 hands from the keyboard. So you decide before playing with or without dampers. And playing without dampers, it's possible. Many years later, Beethoven prescribes without dampers for the Moonshine Sonata, as you probably know. This is not possible on a modern piano, but I tried it with my weak forces to play this on this piano, and it works as well as I can. There is a second stop here, this button, and this is a moderator. A moderator is a device to soften the sound. So if you have the hammer knocking up to the string, like this, there is, with this knob, you pull a fine piece of cloth between the hammer and the chord, and this softens the sound. Normally also knee lever or pedal operated. This piano also, this is a hand stop. So I think we will hear something about this piano afterwards, but let's hear the piano himself. Yeah, it's if we are right with circa 1790, so just 2 years after Stein, the difference is enormous. It's striking. By the way, Anton Walter was like many of instrument makers of the time. Was also German. He was born near Stuttgart and went to Vienna. So the instrument makers, the situation of Germany, as I described it, with all these small states, pushed the instrument makers to go to the big centers. So they went to London, they went to Paris, they went to Vienna and elsewhere. So many of the great makers are from German source. Next one is Johann David Schiedmayer. It was constructed in Nuremberg in 1794. Schiedmayer was a strange personality. I know this, or we know this, because his workshop book with his hand notices is preserved, and it has been edited, and it will be re-edited in facsimile. And we know that Schiedmayer, he had problems with his health. He was almost depressive, but he was a terrific maker. And if you have a look at this piano, these walnut inlays on the side, and there is in this piano literally all is perfect. There is not a single flaw. If you look into the piano, things you don't see normally, it's all perfect. He made every piano by himself. He had a case maker to help him, but he had no aid. And he made 2 pianos a year and about a little more than 30 pianos in all in his lifetime. So these instruments are extremely rare, and they are extremely precious. These are not because these are good pianos. The King of Bavaria ordered one from him. Not this one. This we know this was delivered to a professor from the University of Erlangen, close to Nuremberg, Professor Memel, who was very fond of it. He was very lucky. And this instrument, which you see here, is mentioned in 2 encyclopedias of the time, shortly after 1800, as the best pianos ever made. So it's perhaps a little bit exaggerated, but and there are, they knew each other, the author and the maker, perhaps, but okay, Walter also made very good pianos. We have it. We have it on the. We have it on the on the computer. We can allow. Yes, we will talk about this. That's an interesting story. He didn't believe me that one can play this very well on this piano. We will talk. So this a third very different sound, nearly a harp-like sound. And could you imagine that this was a pupil of Johann Andreas Stein, of the first piano we heard? So the difference is, again, very large. The fourth piano, Nanette Streicher, née Stein, born Stein. She signed like this, Vienna, circa 1803. This was, I mentioned her, she played with her father and Mozart in Augsburg. This is the daughter of Johann Andreas Stein. And after the death of the father, she married Johann Baptist, no, not Johann Baptist, this was her son, Andreas Streicher. He was a piano teacher and writer, and they moved to Vienna together with her brother, Matthäus Andreas Stein, and founded a piano workshop. In 1802, they get angry with each other, and everyone got their own ways. And so the most successful workshop was the one of Nanette Streicher, always née Stein, born Stein. She profited from her father's name. And Andreas Streicher, her husband, made the administration. They were great friends with Beethoven, close friends with Ludwig van Beethoven. And she turned the workshop. And turning the workshop is not, doesn't mean to observe and tell things. She worked. She could build pianos. She built pianos in this workshop. At the age of 10, she was not only an excellent player. At the age of 10, she knew how to tune and regulate a piano. And a few years later, she could build a piano. So it was a power woman, as we could tell this. And one of the most successful workshops in Vienna. Let's hear. So another different sound in the basses, I would say it's not far from Walter, and the trebles, it's something like between harp and harpsichord, I feel. So another one by Anton Walter, and it is not the last. This is typical Walter piano, of which he built a lot. But what is special in this piano is its decoration. It's in U, yes. So it's surely a special command. It's not a usual piano, usual design. Let's hear it. Okay, and another Walter. So this is very particular in this recording and in this collection. Instruments by Anton Walter, which Mozart appreciated, were said to be amongst the best ever made. And we have 5 of them and 3 in playable condition. 3 we could use for this recording, and in one concert to celebrate this, we had 3 Walter pianos on stage, and he played on all 3. This was unique. This never happened, and I'm afraid this will never happen again, perhaps. But we have photographs and recordings of this. It was a really great moment. So this instrument, there is Vienna circa 1800. And this is the good model, the precious model which Walter furnished with mahogany outer side and gilt brass castings. And we have even the original chair for this piano, which is very rare. And it is said to have come from Dorothea of Kurland. This is one of these sovereigns in the northeast of Germany. And yeah, this is the model which Beethoven claimed from Walter. There is a citation of Beethoven in these conversational books. And he said, yeah, everyone, the whole pest of the Vienna piano makers wants to make me a piano, wants to offer me a piano, but I don't want them. I want a piano by Walter, and it has to be on mahogany and with gilt brass castings, and I will pay for it. Okay, so this is this model, and actually we're making the descriptive catalog of these instruments, and with a researcher from The Hague. And one day I came to the collection, and he was lying under this piano like a mechanic under a car. And he said, Frank, come, look here. And I said, okay, what is this? Okay, there's some small things. I said, you know what this means? No. And he said, this piano is not in its original state. It was probably, so we don't know how it was in the beginning, but probably like the first Walter, which I showed you with the hand operated stops. And it was taken to the Walter workshop and furnished with this outer design. So probably the owner, perhaps this sovereign, put it in a different room or had new furniture made, and as pianos are furniture, she had to have changed the piano, the outer finish. Okay, and the last, this will go quick because we know nothing about the maker. So we can do archival research in Ratisbon, but it hasn't been done. The only thing we can say that he was probably a pupil of Walter, but not only. And it's also the last piano in this series, about 1805, Walter type piano, but different sound as always. And it's like this. Okay, and the outcome of all this project, which we led in between 2002, I think, and 2006, were these 6 CDs, of which one double, so 7, and this book. And this book, Orchestre de la Nouvelle France, permitted me to live a dream, to realize a dream. I wanted to make a pretty book and document this project, and I think it's the only book which is dedicated only to document a recording project. And I asked all people concerned with this project, so sound engineers, conservators, press people, and myself and Ludwig, to everyone to write really freely and be it controversial about this project, to have this different perspective, and this is in the name, Pianos in Perspective. And a dream came true when you see the the cover photograph. This is made by Ute Klopphaus, the photographer of Joseph Beuys, the German artist, and she made 11 photographs of the pianos where she wanted in the museum artistic photographs, and we choose the best paper and the best print and the best layouter. So I'm happy with this. Okay, I'm at the end. As such a project, as it has to do with music, it's not only rational and it's not only things to explore or to describe. It has a lot to do with emotion and atmosphere. And to give you a weak impression of this atmosphere about in this project, a 2-minute slideshow with photographs from the book as they appear in the book, and 2 minutes of music with Ludwig. Thank you for your attention.
Avec chaque piano, on devrait faire une petite discussion. We should have had discussions between each instrument, so let's do it now.
We will discuss the instruments.
Yeah.
What is your favorite instrument?
My favorite instrument is the Walter with no pedals.
Yeah, I knew this.
Yeah.
He was in the reserve, and our conservator Georg Ott, whom you have seen tuning, he said, "Come to the reserve. We put out the Walter." I said, "Oh no, not an instrument from the reserve, please." So it's difficult.
The reserve is this deep cave underneath the museum where they keep all the instruments that aren't in the exhibition. So they're hidden away from the world. But we found them. I found them.
They are conserved.
They're conserved. Okay, that's a technical term for it. For me, they're hidden. And he took me to down to this place, and you have to go through, just like we did, in these long corridors, down deep in the bowels of the museum, where it looks like it's bomb-proofed, so that in case there's World War III or something, the instruments will be safe. And he opened the door.
The pianists who are playing.
And the pianists will be safe too. We could go there and just play it, and we'll be safe as long as we have food. And he took me in, and it's actually an amazing sight. The pianos are all stacked on top of each other with the legs taken off in drawers, and there's just rows. Like, imagine this room where the whole walls are filled with pianos stacked one on top of the other, and let's say each place is about 6 feet long, and then there's little alleys you could pass in between the pianos, and on either side there's pianos, and you just sort of open a drawer, and out comes this piano with a little mark tag on it. So in the book I write that I felt like I was in a morgue, because it's like little toe tags on the pianos, and you just turn it. This is Mr. Walter from 1789. This is Mr. Stein from 1788, and I said, my God, what are we going to do with this? And Mr. Ott that he mentioned, he's the technician who worked on all the pianos, getting them ready for me. He told me about this piano. Yeah. He said, you must come see this piano. Dr. Baer wasn't too keen about the whole thing because it's an awful pain in the neck for him to take a piano from the reserve and bring it up thing. But once I played on this piano, I realized that this was one of the most important pianos that they have in the collection. The importance of the piano is not just the sound, which I loved, but the importance for me was that it was the closest thing that still exists to Mozart's own piano that he had. Dr. Baer talked about it. Yeah, why don't you put it on so we could see it? Yeah. Is that it? No. In any case, I'll keep on talking. Yeah, you'll find it. Mozart, as he said, Mozart's piano, which is in Salzburg now, was a Walter type piano, just like this one, except that right after Mozart's death, is that it? Yeah, that's it. That's right. What happened is after we could put the sound on later. After Mozart's death, his wife sent it back to Walter's shop. We think that she sent it back to Walter's shop to have it modernized, because the most interesting thing, and in a way the most primitive thing about this piano, there's a real dichotomy about this piano, actually. In one way, it's very modern in that it's probably the most powerful of all the instruments that I played. Compared to the Stein piano, it has 3 strings in the top part and 2 strings in the bass, whereas the Stein type has 2 strings throughout. Yeah. Even Stein's daughter, Nanette, whose piano is later than this, still has only 2 strings. What this does is that it enables Mozart to write for a larger range. When I say range, the range of the piano hasn't changed really, but he's able to use the overtones of the bass to complement the melody in the treble without being afraid of overpowering the melody by using bass. In a Stein type of piano, of the earlier type that we were saying, Mozart would always have to write, or any other composer, of course, would have to write for a rather narrow range. The bass and the singing voice, the treble, would have to be quite close together, or else you're in danger of overpowering it, because the bass strings are very long and powerful, and with only 2 strings in the top part, it could be easily overpowered. Whereas what Walter did is he added the 3rd string for the top half of the piano, therefore enabling the composer and the player to really exploit the bass and still not overpower the treble and use the overtones and create a much smoother sound, not so metallic, and exploit the overtones. Now that's the forward-looking aspect of the piano. The backward-looking aspect of the piano is that, as Dr. Baer explained, pianos of this time, in Germany at least, had knee pedals. In other words, what we see now on modern piano, that you use your foot, you use your knees. You have to lift up to use the pedals. They have little things underneath the bass, just underneath the keyboard, where you lift up. In this, as he explained, it had hand levers, where you have to, by hand, lift it up if you want to use the pedal. Now, the problem with that is that you can't play and change pedal at the same time. You have to either completely stop playing and change the pedal, or keep the pedal on for a half an hour at a time. Or you could take your chances and do it really fast if you have a real break, but that's sort of courting disaster, and I tried it, and it's not the greatest idea. But what I realized is that this was not an important thing for Mozart, because he, of course, had a choice. He could have bought a Stein piano. He loved the Stein pianos when he first saw them in 1777, when Dr. Baer was talking about he went to the church and they all played on the instruments. But when he was in Vienna, he saw the Walter pianos, and after a couple of years, after making a little bit of money and getting better known, he decided to buy one of these. And the importance of this historically is that it really opened up his ability to write for the piano. He felt less constrained, and one of the interesting things is that he stopped writing solo sonatas altogether almost for a good 4 years, because what he saw was that the power of this piano was such that he was able to use an orchestra with the piano without any fear of the piano being overpowered, which was always a problem. In the days previous to this, 1785 is when we really know that he had this piano. It's not for sure known exactly when he bought it, but 1785 is the first documented letter we have of him giving a concert on this piano that he bought. Before that, concertos were basically piano sonatas with little accompaniments, with a couple of strings. If you're lucky, you get in a couple of oboes, maybe a horn or two, add a bassoon, add a trumpet, and you're asking for trouble, add timpani, and you better do it when the piano's not playing. And basically, it was just accompaniment, basically, what's the word I'm looking for? It's to not to comfort, but to support the instrument. The orchestra would support the instrument. Whereas here, he...
Not forget, pardon me, but not
Yeah,
forget that the loud instrument was not the piano, this was the harpsichord.
Yes,
The
harpsichord
piano
louder.
was the expressive instrument.
Right. And
In this time of coexistence.
right.
Yeah.
And the harpsichord,
But now, yeah.
and the harpsichord also had the advantage of blending better with,
Yeah.
with an orchestra. The piano, of course, we have to remember, is a percussive instrument. The hammers strike the chord, whereas the harpsichord plucks it, right? And a plucked sound naturally goes better with violins, which also use sometimes plucked pizzicato, and just blends better with it. Whereas a piano has this thumping noise because of the mechanics and just the fact that you're hitting a hammer against a string, which tends to disrupt the sort of smooth sound of an orchestra. So the way concertos were written at the time, earlier than Mozart wrote before 1785, is that the orchestra would always be in the background, and there would be more or less, the orchestra would stop, the piano would start, the orchestra would start, and then the piano would continue, and rarely you'd have the strings maybe supporting the piano, but it was very rare that you'd have wind instruments in a dialogue with the harpsichord or the piano, or let alone brass or timpani. But with this piano, with the type of deep basses it has and a strong treble, he was able to really use a complete symphonic orchestra. In other words, what he made was his concertos weren't so much pianos supported by a couple of strings and a couple of winds, but real symphonic works where the piano was really integrated within the symphonic form. And this was probably the most important development of the 18th century, because this really paved the way for Beethoven, Brahms, and everybody else to write these huge concertos for the piano. And when you think of old instruments, you think that they're automatically weak, and they're weaker, and it needs a modern instrument in order to bring out the full colors and the aspects of one of the great Mozart concertos. And I even thought that, even before I was able to play on these instruments, before I had only played on a couple of original instruments and some copies. And when I came across this instrument, I realized why Mozart bought the instrument. He saw that he's going to be able to expand his musical range and expand his expressive power by integrating a symphonic way of writing. Even in his solo works, in the C minor sonata that we heard a little bit, you could already hear how strong and powerful this instrument is. Now, the problem with the pedal is a huge problem. In a way, it's unresolvable. We can't know, because Mozart wrote no pedaling directions, we can't know how he would have used it. Now, just the fact that they exist means that he used them. So to just dismiss it outright and say, well, this is unusable, you can't just put the pedal on for a whole movement and have all this mash of sound with harmonies sort of overlapping and sounding almost like Debussy instead of Mozart. And yet, when I tried this in our famous experiment with the three Walters on stage, I was able to see that by pulling this stop he was talking about, which is a moderator, which, as he explained, is a little felt, a piece of felt that goes throughout the keyboard on the strings, and it goes in between the strings and the hammer, so it moderates the sound. So there's this felt. It's like putting a kerchief over something to dampen the sound of it. So what it does is that it creates this sound that dies very quickly, so that you're able to lift the pedal, especially in slow movements and in soft passages, completely with both hands, and just play throughout the whole movement and let the harmonies overlap and create this sort of mist of sound that sort of envelopes everything. And because the sound dies so quickly on these instruments, you don't have this terrible sound in your ears. The notes, by the time you reach the third or fourth harmonies, the first have already died off. So it's not so bad, and it actually creates a fabulous effect. On records, I must say the engineers were a bit shocked when I did it. They said that this is not the type of Mozart anybody's used to. And we had a long discussion about whether they would edit parts of it. In other words, where they were artificially change the pedaling. In other words, I would play through it and then stop, change the pedal, and then keep on playing and then put it together again. And we did this for one movement and it worked fairly well.
Yeah, but last Saturday we had a concert and and the visitor. Said, how is Ludwig? And, yeah, I will see him there. So, yeah, but what he played there, and this is exactly what you described in the concert. No, it was awful with the dampers lifted. And I said, so I have to be polite. It's a client. The visitors say, okay, your opinion. I was charmed.
Yeah, I was charmed.
I was charmed. I
Yes.
was sitting down to the left, and I had really this, and I said, what is he doing? Yeah, he has the dampers up. And,
It was.
dampers lifted.
I had a choice. I would either have to ignore these hand dampers or use them, and logic said that since they existed, they must have been used. And I think that we have a certain taboo in modern playing where we've gotten so used to changing pedals with every harmony that when we hear this type of sounds that overlap, we just say this is god awful. This is like it's hearing like two pieces being played at the same time. It's like impossible. But I really think that taboo didn't exist in those days. And if anything, this was just part of the experiments that were coming about. This hand lever was finally dropped. Knee levers were used, and then foot pedals came into production, which you were able to control even more. But like he said, and in some Haydn works also, you can see that they write specifically that, like for the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata of Beethoven writes specifically that this whole movement should be played very softly, very delicately, and without pedal, and with pedal. In other words, without dampers. And on this piano, it works. On a modern piano, it sounds terrible. So this is one of the interesting things about this piano. It's a bit of a throwback because of the pedal, but it looks forward because of the power and the sound that it has. And what else were we going to talk about?
One thing you are seeing, he's still enthusiastic about this experience.
Yeah.
So I couldn't say no. And I'm glad I didn't. Huh?
Yeah.
So I heard him playing, and this was impressive, and I wanted to have this. But what about the Schiedmeier? You want to talk about this?
Yes, I like the Schiedmeier piano is sort of the
Alla Turca?
yeah, it's a unique instrument. It was something I'd never come across. I talked to one of the to people specialists in pianos, and what's interesting about this piano is that what I was talking about, the moderator, this felt thing that goes. Do you want to play it?
Yeah, no, I want to.
You want to show it?
Get it, but there will be music. This one, okay.
Oh, we've got a nice little C. Okay, and this is the instrument. Now this is basically very much influenced by the Stein type.
Yeah, he was a pupil of
It's a
Stein.
pupil of Stein. In other words, it doesn't have nearly the power of a Walter piano. What's interesting about this piano is that this moderator pedal, this felt that goes between the strings and the hammers to moderate the sound, which usually you use for special effects in slow movements, etc., when you want a very soft effect. In this case, it's permanently on. In other words, you have to press the knee pedal to remove it. Usually it's the other way around. You press it to use it, but this way, remove it. Now, there's a certain amount of controversy about this, but it seems to be pretty much agreed that it was a shortcut. Now, when I say shortcut, it means that each hammer has a felt lining on it.
Leather.
Each
Leather.
leather. Okay, sorry, leather. That's right. The felt is the moderator. Leather coating on it, and many people think that this was actually a shortcut. In other words, he would, instead of putting leather on each hammer, which is a labor-intensive thing and takes a long time to do, you would just put this moderator on permanently and have bare wooden hammers. So if you have bare wooden hammers hitting the string, it would sound like a xylophone. But with this permanent felt on it, in between the hammer and the strings, you'd get more or less the same effect as you would if each hammer had a leather coating on it itself. So it was basically a shortcut. But the thing about this piano, that there are leather coatings on each of the hammers.
Yeah, but
But this is a later addition.
yes,
This is what we think is a later addition.
but I think I'm not sure it's a shortcut. There is what did I read? There is something, a description. I don't know by heart where it was published at the time of Schiedmeier, that his piano sounds like a piano, and when you make this register, you use this knee lever. It sounds very like. It sounds very loud and like a clavecin, so like a harpsichord.
Xylophone almost. A xylophone even. Very metallic. Wood on metal.
Oh, no, not a xylophone, or a hammered dulcimer. So no, this is
Okay.
where the piano comes from. The hammered dulcimer with bare wooden hammers, and the other side with leathered hammers. But the description says harpsichord.
So it sounds like a harpsichord.
It sounds like a harpsichord, and also as brilliant as a harpsichord. So maybe this was not simply a shortcut, because perhaps he wanted it. He wanted not to lose this harpsichord sound, because this
metallic sound.
This metallic sound, yeah. But I think they.
But then why?
For them, this was harpsichord sound.
But then why would it be permanently on this as opposed to?
To have a piano, and this you have a forte register.
All right. So
Forte stop, not we call forte
loud.
We lift the damper.
Right.
But this is a real forte stop.
Okay.
Okay. This is one hypothesis. The other one, what you said, is another hypothesis. So
we take our pick.
But shall we discuss this?
Yes.
Okay, if it is a shortcut, why remove why make the moderator removable? Why not let it permanently?
The moderator is permanently on it.
Yes, but
You have to remove it by pressing the pedal.
Yeah, but why do you have a pedal to remove it if the sound is okay like this?
You mean okay with no leathers on it?
No, when you have this sound,
With
when you replace the leathers by the clock
by the moderator, yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason to put it away in playing.
It would just be louder, but this would be the exception as opposed to the rule.
Okay.
Whereas it's the other way around usually. Usually you press the pedal.
Okay, we meet. Okay, and now there are leathers on it because these instruments were restored, and this was in the 1940s,
Basically,
50s, and so this is a historical trace.
Was it done so late, you think? Do you have any
Sure,
idea
we
when
have
these
to,
leathers were put
or
on?
was it Otto Marx in 1920? I don't know.
Okay. In any case, what happened is that regardless of which hypothesis is right and which is wrong, and I'm not the curator, I just play, and so
Yes, but we have your opinions.
of course,
And
but they're purely aesthetic.
I'm interested in it because this is one perspective.
Yeah, an aesthetic perspective, not historical. So what happens is that since there's this moderator that's permanently on, plus there's leather hammers, leather lining on each hammer, you're getting a double moderating effect when you're playing without removing it. So therefore you have this extremely soft sound. So I, being a bit crazy sometimes, decided to record the famous Turkish March sonata on it. Usually this is done quite brilliantly and quite fast, but because of this double moderation, it gave me this weird idea of using this very soft sound that this double moderation does for the soft passages, and then removing the moderator for the big loud crashes that come afterwards. And this gave the biggest contrast I've ever heard for this Turkish march. And I could only imagine that if there was no leathers at all,
Yeah, this would have,
how
yeah.
it would have sounded like cymbals, really cymbals.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we can't remove the leathers, but it's the closest thing that we can. At least in my imagination, I was able to say that you could play the beginning part almost as if the Turkish Janissary army was coming from somewhere very far away and slowly was coming closer and closer. Then all of a sudden, bang! Cymbals.
Yeah, I think we can demonstrate. It is on the computer.
Is it on the
No, yes. How can I?
I
If
don't
you're
know.
interested, it's really striking. I said when I heard it first, I said, how can he play this so slow and so soft? Okay, this is which Kirchenverzeichnis?
331,
330. I have
third movement.
I have it. 331. 3. Oh yes, of course.
Thanks. Sure, go ahead.
We have we have time for some questions in the audience.
Yes?
When you played the Turkish march and you took off the moderator, you had to dampen all the time up?
I took the damper off also at the same time to get the sonority. I didn't want to kill the sound.
The next question is, I was in Vienna and visited Beethoven's last house on the Probostgat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really impressive when you see how these people live, not to speak about Mozart house in Beethoven's. Do you know what kind of piano is
In this house? Do you know which one it is? Beethoven had three.
it? He had some.
He had many pianos. You see.
Which one? No, I don't know.
I'm not sure which one was in this house.
No, but he played a Walter piano.
He never owned a Walter piano. He played Walter pianos a lot. In his earliest years, he had many presents. You see, there was a way of marketing, whereas at least after 1800, Mozart unfortunately was a little too young, died too young to take advantage of this. But Beethoven, a lot of piano makers gave him pianos in order to say, I gave a piano to Beethoven. Beethoven plays on my pianos. One of the first pianos that he received was in the 19th century, was a French piano, actually, an Erard.
Yeah, it's
From-
from the era and afterwards the Broadwood.
Right, first was the Erard, and he wasn't happy with it. And he sent it to actually Nanette's workshop to be redone, and she redid it, and he still wasn't happy with it. And then after that, he received the Broadwood from England, which was a very beautiful piano, which still exists now in the Beethoven House in Bonn. And he used
It's
that,
the graph in the Beethoven.
and there's a Broadwood also.
It's also a Broadwood. I don't
Also
know.
Broadwood,
I was
1817
focused on the
Broadwood.
graph.
Yeah. And he used that for that part of his life. And at the end of his life, he had a Graf, which is a larger piano. Actually, graph will be the type of piano I'm using for the concert tomorrow. If you're interested, it's in the Coolidge Hall right next door to here, or there. Okay, there. The problem with Beethoven is that there's a big problem because by 1800, when he was 30 years old, he was already going deaf. And so his appreciation of pianos is very difficult to document because he himself was always frustrated with his own deafness. And in many ways, he stopped performing live after that time. So the pianos that he had, one of the reasons that he kept having them fixed and he was never happy is because he himself had so much trouble hearing them. So in many ways, I find Beethoven an unreliable source of information on pianos because he not only because of his deafness, but because of the time, he was already internalizing music. In other words, he was writing for himself, and he was writing in a way that wasn't necessarily even possible for certain instruments at the time. He was really ahead of the time, the real romantic type of way of looking at things. Whereas Mozart was a consummate practicalist. He would use whatever piano he had and write accordingly for that piano. When he wrote for the Stein instruments, he never surpassed the instruments. He never asked the instruments to do things that they couldn't do. And only when he would be introduced to a Walter instruments, then he would go on and write for a more advanced type of writing for the pianos that he had.
Questions?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Question about two questions. One about the pianos. Did they stand lower than they do now, and were the keys also not as wide as today, or
Yeah.
the same width?
No, they're much narrower, and they're much lower. It's very, very hard. Sometimes my knees couldn't get under the piano. It's actually, everything is smaller. It's made for smaller people. It's made for a smaller time. And one of the interesting things is that the width of the keys themselves vary from piano to piano. There was no set diameter or length. So it's really difficult.
It's width and length and proportion. So
everything
Stein and Walter, it's completely different,
Right.
where you have to place your fingers.
The Stein piano, for instance, is extremely narrow but longer.
Yeah.
The Walter piano is a little wider but shorter. And then there's the other problem is that in the sharps, between the sharps and the flats, it's very small. And you really have to use the tips of your fingers. You can't like play a chord and put your whole finger in it, because then you're going to end up playing two notes at the same time because it's so narrow. I have a feeling that at the time, the way people played were they would pull away more than hit. They would always touch but pulling away. In other words, not to get yourself stuck in between the chord, the notes. But at the same time, people were much smaller in those days and had smaller hands, and it's not an easy thing.
My other, more of a comment actually, when you were talking about your Turkish march, the way you played the Turkish march, made me think of the Mannheim sound, the Mannheim rocket.
Right.
Also like the 31st Symphony. And was that sonata written long after the symphony, or at the same time? I can't remember the.
A couple of years later, the Turkish sonata was written in his first years in Vienna around 1782, and he wrote the Mannheim sonata, the Mannheim works, the symphony and the Sinfonia Concertante is a couple of years in 1777. But actually, it's interesting. There is a connection because he wrote this Turkish sonata the same year as he was writing his Turkish opera, The Abduction from the Seraglio. And so this has a real direct influence. It was very much in style, and he was in that kind of a mood, and he wrote this march at the same time as the opera, the same year.
You had a question?
On Mozart piano concertos, did you see any advantage in using a forte piano with an orchestra using modern instruments? Is there any benefit from that combination?
I don't know if there's a benefit. There are practical problems. First of all, the most difficult problem is tuning. An original instrument from Mozart's time has to be tuned much lower than modern pianos. For instance, the pianos we use now in these recordings were mostly tuned at around 415, which is a good semitone lower than modern pitch. A modern orchestra can't do that. A violin, if you twist their arm, might do it. An oboist will never do that. Never, never, never.
But the sound's away, huh?
Huh?
The sound's gone, huh?
Yeah, and so there's that practical problem. Modern copies, on the other hand, you can tune them higher. Now, there's no reason not to do it.
Is there any positive reason to do it?
The positive reason is that there's more modern orchestras than there are period orchestras, and they're easier to find. But then again, you put a 18th century piano in front of a modern symphony orchestra and they'll have absolutely no idea what to do. First of all, they'll completely overpower it, and they'll have to play in a totally different way than they're used to it. In other words, with much less vibrato, because that vibrato will make the sound last too long, whereas the piano sound does not last long enough. And there's also the problem of balance. In Mozart's time, even in Mozart's time, when he used large pianos, very often when the piano played, he would only use half the strings sometimes in order not to overpower the piano. Where in modern pianos, you don't have this problem. And the same thing, to reverse your question, if you could use a modern piano with old instruments, then you'll have the reverse problem. All you hear is piano, and you won't hear any instruments at all. So the best thing is to use old instruments with old pianos, but I'm not against using an old instrument on modern pianos if these practical problems could be overcome. If they can, I'm not sure. Like I said, no oboist is going to play at 415 on a modern oboe. Sure.
Strings, original ones?
No. Sometimes we have rests of strings, of probably original strings, and they are very precious. They are analyzed and kept, but no, these strings are no longer original. And there are sometimes big discussions about stringing, with what you string, with brass or with steel, and from where on, and which pitch and which size, and so on and so on and so on. So these are also always reconstructions and compromises.
It's also something I should probably mention between the Stein piano and the Walter piano. Another innovation that came about, and probably another reason why Mozart decided to buy a Walter piano as opposed to a Stein piano, is that Stein piano doesn't have what we call back checks. A back check is when you press a key and the hammer goes up and hits the string and then falls back. There's a little check that catches the hammer as it falls. This didn't exist in Stein pianos and even Nanette's pianos. So there's always the problem of wildly bouncing hammers. So especially when you're playing fast and loud, you have the danger of the hammer crashing back down, bouncing back, and hitting the string again. So you have to really try to control it very well and play extremely lightly. So this.
So I remember when I first recording with the Stein, he came, he played, and this was, I think, first or fifth recording session, and we didn't do it chronologically from the pianos, and we put the Stein, and the Stein is an instrument which poses no problems. It's stable and reliable, and yeah, he played, and I came.
I was depressed.
Yeah, he said he was depressed. I've never seen him like this. And so he went out, and when he came back, I will have to learn it. The lendemain,
the next day. Yeah. Well, what I had to learn.
Next day, I found it.
I found the way to do it. The way to do it is you have to control, because when you play piano, there's a tendency of once you hit the note to forget about it. It's done, and you rely on the modern mechanism to take care of the hammer as it falls back and then hit it again next time you use it. Whereas on these old pianos, the very old ones like the Stein type, you almost have to control the release. You have to know, not just hit, but release. so that you press it and then slowly remove your finger from the key so that the hammer doesn't just crash down, so that it just places it down. So just one more thing to think about when you're playing. Yeah. Sure.
When did you become interested, and how did you acquire your formidable expertise in early piano?
Trial and error. I'm not what you call a period instrument expert, meaning maybe I'm an expert now because I've been doing it for a certain amount of time, but I'm not a specialist, let's say. I wasn't brought up with period instruments. I went to school playing on modern pianos, a typical romantic, loving, Rachmaninoff loving student who wanted to play all the great Tchaikovskys and Chopins when I was in university.
Chopin.
Chopin. Yes.
And where was that?
In McGill in Montreal. And the story is, I was talking to you before about the story. It's a funny story, actually. When I was in my first year in university, we had a field trip where we all went to the Boston Conservatory. And it was one of these typical student concerts where a bunch of students were chosen by the professor, and you were able to play for 10 minutes. You choose a work, and there's a couple of people in the audience. And it's just an experience to do it at the Boston Conservatory. And I went there and I played. And I played a Mozart sonata, because Mozart always been one of my favorites. And after I played, a man came backstage, an older man, a huge man, scary looking, like a pirate. Not a Somali pirate, but a real pirate. and he said to me, you have to try to play on one of my pianos. It turns out that he was a piano maker who made copies of these old instruments in Connecticut. His name was David Way. He's passed away now. And he invited me to his workshop where he had a piano in the process of being built. And I played on it, and I was amazed. I would never thought that these, what I always thought were sort of strange, little primitive, sort of like Model T versions of pianos, would be able to do everything that a modern piano would do, just on its own terms. And a couple of summers later, I went back to his shop, and he told me that he's going to build me a piano for me to use for a while. And he lent it to me. He was nice enough to lend it to me for a couple of years. I ended up buying it, and that was the beginning. And then my next step was when I went to Dr. Baer's museum, and I played on originals as opposed to copies. And that was my second epiphany, where I said,
yes, this is what I wanted to know this from you. We never talked about this. What do you feel when you're playing a copy? This is quite different, but what does it with you to the original?
Well, apart from the mystical experience of playing a piano that was built during the time of these great composers, the practical thing, what I'm amazed, not to take anything away from modern copies, where some of them are just lovely, like the one we have for the concert tomorrow, just wonderful. But they're missing something that I can only describe as a soul, something that has this kind of sound that you feel the experimentation of the person who is making it. In other words, you feel that each little difference between each piano has been thought about and worried about and lost sleep over and troubled over until he was able to find the right way of doing it. And then the next day he says, I could do it even better. And the next piano is completely different. Now that was a real revelation, because when I played copies, they're more or less copies on one type of piano. There's either Walter copies or Graf copies or this copies, and they're basically similar, the only difference being some are better than others, just like cars. But on these old instruments, even the same maker making the same type of piano a couple of years later is completely different. He's changed his mind. Once a piano is finished, he puts it away and he goes on and he discovers new things while in the process of making this piano and puts it in practice in the next piano that's coming up. So there's this type of evolution of sound that you get from one piano to the other that really, truly shows how difficult it was in those days for not only the makers, but the composers and the performers to, there was no stable way of anything. You could never rely on an instrument being exactly the same for each concert if you're playing on a different instrument. So the composers had to adapt, the players had to adapt, and the makers had to adapt. Now the great question is, who influenced whom? And I think it's basically a mutual influence. One influenced the other. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow during the concert, I'm going to be talking about this. I'm playing 3 different sonatas written in a span of only 10 years, written for 3 very different pianos. And I'm going to be demonstrating and speaking before each sonata, showing how the piano itself influenced the work that was written at the time, and how the next work, even though it was written only a year and a half later, is completely different in its style because of the pianos that evolved. And so the most important thing I think I learned from playing an original instrument is that no two are alike. And you feel this evolution. And you feel the same evolution as you do when you go through the 17 Mozart sonatas. You see Mozart's development, but then you also realize that Mozart's development wouldn't have been what it was if it wasn't for the development of the pianos that was happening at the exact same time. And this is a real mystical experience, that you really feel how important mechanics and tools were to these artists. It wasn't some kind of divine inspiration that just made Mozart all of a sudden decide to write a great concerto with a huge orchestra from one year to the next, but it was partly because of the instrument makers who gave him the opportunity to fulfill his imagination and write the great works that he did.
Great, okay, well,
Let's take one more.
one more question, because we have to...
This is to reverse the question. Have you performed a program where you played the same piece on 2 or 3 different pianos, including possibly a modern?
Yes, I have. Actually, it's one of the things I believe in most, is that I don't like to be didactic with this type of thing. In other words, if I'd be playing a Mozart sonata tomorrow on an instrument that's written after Mozart died, this doesn't bother me. And playing on a modern piano, I've learned a lot of things that you could take from the old piano experience and apply it to a modern piano. The interesting thing about the development of the piano, or any instrument, any other instrument actually, but especially the piano, is that as it evolves, it doesn't really lose one from the other. In other words, each piano exists in the piano that comes after it. So if you look for the fortepiano in a modern piano, you could find it. So I wouldn't say that Mozart needs to be played on an instrument made in Mozart's time, because as Mozart developed, the pianos also developed. The longer he would have lived, the more he would have used a more modern piano. There's no such thing as saying that a work must be played on a certain instrument, because all composers adapted to what they had in front of them. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thanks.
I can confirm this A minor sonata, which we heard from the sound example, what was recorded on the Walter with a mahogany case. And he played it also in a later concert on the Stein, and this was a different piece.
Right. I played, for instance, I recorded it on one piano, but performed it on another piano, and it was I had to completely rethink my vision of the piece. But it's amazing how you could play the same piece in different ways just by the fact of having a different piano in front of you. It's really fascinating, especially since we're used to, in these days, having the perfection of a Steinway, and each one is more or less as perfect as the next. And we rely on only our imagination to make differences in style, whereas in that time they relied on the instrument makers themselves to give them inspirations of how to perform their works. It was a great experience.
Great. Well, thank you
Thanks.
very much. And
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.